Welcome to Desperately Seeking the 80s. I am Meg.
And I am Jessica. And Meg and I have been friends since 1982. We got through middle school and high school together here in New York City, where we still live.
And where we podcast about New York City in the 80s. I do Ripped from the Headlines.
And I do pop culture.
So we're going to do something a little different today.
I know, and I'm delighted about this.
And we actually said we were going to do this. And sometimes we say we're going to do things and we don't really get around to doing it.
It just doesn't happen.
But this time we did. We watched the pilot episode of Moonlighting.
Because I didn't remember the pilot episode at all. But I was so excited because I was like, when you suggested that as the show, I was like, oh my God, it's so perfect. And it's so 80s. But of course it was like a sense. But then after I saw it,
in contrast to many shows that are in rotation, what do you call that when you see shows again and again and again? What do you call that?
Reruns?
Reruns. Thank you. Oh my God. I'm sorry. My brain.
Yeah, that's okay.
Reruns. I mean, like my kids have seen Friends.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They've seen Seinfeld.
Mm-hmm.
They've watched the whole damn thing.
No one watches
No
Moonlighting.
one has seen Moonlighting.
And there's a reason for that. There's a very strong reason that we will discuss on this show.
Moonlighting, just to let everybody know, was a dramedy, hour-long dramedy starring Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis.
And it was, interestingly, because Sybil Shepherd had a real heyday in the very late 70s and very, very early 80s, and she was sort of Peter Bogdanovich's it girl. The show was designed to bump her career back up again, and it was an opportunity to launch the new Bruce Willis that no one had ever seen before.
So, shall we get started?
Indeed.
And just to tell everybody, so we watched this separately.
Mm-hmm.
We have not discussed it at all.
Discussed is a good word.
We've tried very, very hard not to...
Not a word.
Talk about this off mic, and now we're going to dive in. Now I'm getting a sense of what you thought about it, and I didn't before. But okay, let's get into it.
And now we begin.
Now we begin.
So, Meg, I'm just going to jump right in here. From my perspective, while it was entertaining in some weird ways, I saw this as a cornucopia of errors.
Huh.
Yes.
I did not. I appreciated the opening because it really was a mystery. First of all...
Well, we didn't mention that in the intro, that it was a dramedy it's a private eye firm and they're solving mysteries.
Right. But they haven't met yet.
Correct.
So it opens with Sybil Shepherd waking up and we see her beautiful home. She's obviously
No, we wake up with the guy with the going for the run.
Both. Though they go back and forth between those two people waking up. We've got Sybil Shepherd and we've got the guy who's a complete mystery person waking up and putting the watch on and going for the run.
Yeah, I'm just saying he went. Okay, great. Great.
Anyway, and so I was like, I'm intrigued. And because it was trope free, I really actually didn't know where it was going.
Yes, it was a blank slate. So the visual is, as you described, Sybil Shepherd, who was so beautiful, it was ridiculous, waking up in her satiny bedroom, surrounded by, this is already where I started to laugh, all of her, because on the show she had been a model, all of her magazine covers, and some of them were actually very famous photos of her that they mocked up as magazine covers, but my favorite was that they put in so little effort on one of them, the magazine was just called Fashion. I was like, funny. Oh my God.
Now, wasn't it weird when you heard her chef crashing all of her dishes? I felt like that was the beginning of something that was very unusual. And again, not a trope where it's like, that's a little violent.
Everything about the opening of her opening, not the guy we're going to talk about in a second, was so absurd and so badly written that it was like you get the information pretty quickly that there's something wrong with her finances
Yes.
because it
The
turns
chef
out,
has not been paid.
right, but he has not been paid. A check bounced once and then it was okay. This is the second bounce. And his reaction is to trash her belongings.
But comically, but it's not funny.
No, it's not funny.
It's scary as hell.
He's Italian, so that and 80s. So the
Yeah.
trope is he's passionate and fiery, but the
Yeah.
performance was like, that's a spicy meatball. It was so
ridiculous.
horrible.
And for some reason, Sybil Shepherd isn't screaming and running from the house because her chef is like dangerous. She's kind of like, this is strange. I thought I paid you.
Yeah. There's
You're
like
right.
no.
That is very odd. And the housekeeper is like,
the
actually,
housekeeper who
you haven't paid me either, lady.
The housekeeper played by the woman who was Jerry Seinfeld's mother on Seinfeld. So these shows, and this was no exception. And by the way, that actress's name is Liz Sheridan. But you start to see people and you're like, oh my God, you were in that. You were in that. I know you from that. I know. Don't even say it yet.
You're going to let me say it.
No.
Okay. So getting back to the guy who wakes up and puts on the watch. We don't know who this guy is. He is not Sybil Shepherd. He puts on his watch. He goes for a run. Again, rather 80s of him.
Mm-hmm. We see him putting on his sneakers, wearing very old school sweatpants and like his socks. They're the way that they're filming it is really weird. Like what they're deciding to
I agree.
home in on. It's weird.
And also that the shoes were not Nike. I mean, they were not good running shoes. I was like, you are not going to have a lot of support when you're jogging.
No, they were tennis shoes, as a matter of fact.
Right. And he's jogging.
Yes.
And then as he is jogging, a barefoot man, which in and of itself, very scary.
Weird and never explained that he's barefoot.
But also, I was like, that would threaten me too if there was someone running barefoot next to me with horrific skin, sunglasses, but what do you call them when they're really skinny?
Well, they were like goggles, they're like swim goggles.
A Walkman.
Also, they focused the camera on the Walkman, which of course at the time was nothing. It was the first Walkman. It was the metal one where you put the cassette in and you clipped it closed. So I had a moment of nice.
And the crazy, fakest mohawk ever. You could tell it was made of acrylic. When he put his Walkman headphones over, you could sort of hear it kind of like click in that acrylic kind of way.
Well, and he managed to bury because the sunglasses had an elastic across the back, which is why I thought they were goggles, and the strap went entirely into the mohawk.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah, you're right. It was very acrylic.
And he's the barefoot jogger.
Correct.
Now, this is what was sort of exciting. He's got extraordinarily bad skin, which made me realize, of course, it had to be the same guy from Greece, from the dance scene, and that was kind of awesome.
Crater Face.
Was that his name?
So I did a deep dive on this guy. Can I just quickly tell you?
Yeah.
Okay. So in Greece, he is Cha-Cha Di Gregorio's boyfriend at the dance. He's very scary looking. Of course, so I needed to know more about him because I couldn't remember Crater Face. So I was typing into Google like, terrible skin, Greece, weird guy, acne, and that came right up. And then there was a sweet story that someone was interviewed about in his obituary. Someone was saying that, in fact, he was the nicest guy in Hollywood, and that when Grease was filming, the guy who played Eugene the nerd, Eddie Deason, he was so early in his career, he had to take the bus to the set. And he was saying how hard it was to get there. And Crater Face picked him up every day of shooting and took him.
What's his actual name? Not Crater Face.
It's like something Stewart William, like a really bland name. But what was really interesting is that the makeup artist for Moonlighting put fake zits on top of his pockmarks.
It was
It looked like
so gross.
smallpox. It was like these like weird like growths all over his. It was the worst makeup. They must have given the makeup artist 50 cents and said, "Work it out."
I mean, he was clearly hired because he had bad skin, and then they made his skin even worse.
It wasn't forgiving. But for all of that we have to say about this character, my favorite part about this character comes in maybe 20 minutes later into the show.
Well, do you want to say that now? I mean, we're not gonna do
A blow by blow?
we
Okay.
can't.
So here's the thing that I found the number one thing about the show was that whoever directed it clearly never directed anything before. It was an hour and a half of terrible timing, long lags, scenes that had to be edited but had never been. And as a result, there is a scene. So Craterface winds up taking the watch off of the guy who's been jogging.
The guy who's been jogging actually gets freaked out by Craterface, so he runs into traffic and he gets hit by a car and dies, and then Craterface takes the watch, remember the watch is very important, and he runs off with it.
Right, and he had a gun. He was gonna shoot him, but
He didn't have to.
he didn't have to. So he runs off. Anyway, we find out that the watch is very important, and what then ensues it's what I can only describe as a glass elevator race.
Oh my God, which is so 80s.
It was so
It is,
bizarre.
but come on, think about that for a second.
The glass elevators.
elevator? It's
It was
good.
Mel Brooks used that in High Anxiety
Yes.
to the same effect. But what was hilarious about this was that the scene took, I think, a full 5 minutes. And it was Craterface in a glass elevator that was next to another glass elevator where the guy who he knew was trying to get the watch from him was in. And they just kept going up and down. And like, I'm going to elude you. I'm going to press lobby. Nope, I'm going to go up to the top. And they're staring at each other in the glass.
Come on. It's dramatic because it's a glass elevator.
Well, I mean, if it hadn't been a glass elevator, you never could have done the scene. It was it was so ludicrous. And the guy who plays the guy who's trying to get the watch, I looked him up. It was like something Lipscott or lip something. He's always the stony-faced sociopath.
Yeah.
Like, and he
predates the Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter psychopath.
big time. And at one point in this incredible elevator race, he flicks open the smallest switchblade
It's so true.
you've ever seen in your life. And Craterface goes crazy with fear in the elevator. And by the way, the guy with the switchblade is a middle-aged, portly man. We've just seen Craterface run a marathon barefoot. So it's like, and he has a gun. And so I'm like, Craterface, don't you think you might want to take it down a notch? I don't think this is such a big deal.
But I will say the reaction that Craterface had to the Anthony Hopkins-esque kind of character made me realize, okay, this is the new guy to be scared of. Definitely.
Yes. His name in the show is Mr. Simon.
I'm terrified just because of the name.
But any terror that you could have had about him evaporates in a later scene, which we'll get to. But it was my favorite scene in the entire show. But anyway, back to the elevator.
Yeah. And without doing like a blow by blow, because we will be here all night. Long story short, Craterface gets murdered by...
And we don't know how. This is again why this is... No. How did Simon get into the elevator?
Well,
how did he get going?
I
in
thought
this
I
show,
had missed something.
No, there are so many plot holes.
I kept rewinding to watch, and I was like, did I fall asleep for a heartbeat?
No, they were just like, you know what? He's got to die. Move on. Put a knife in his back. Let's go.
Put a knife in his back, and he hands the watch over to Sybil Shepherd.
Right. He falls out of the elevator. She's been on a bad date, and she's already met Bruce Willis because She has no money. Her accountant embezzled everything. She owns a few businesses. She's got to liquidate them. One of the businesses is a detective agency that is run by the most annoying, smarmy, misogynist fuckface you've ever seen.
Fast talker.
Fast talking, nonsense driveling, thinks he's cute, and actually talks out of the side of his mouth, Bruce Willis. So annoying.
I kind of thought he was awesome.
I thought
I loved
it
his
wasn't that I didn't
character.
like him, Bruce, like the actor. I could see he was working
No,
with
the
what he
character.
had.
I love the character.
I hated, he was so condescending and so that it was like not fun. However, I remembered watching it at the time and being like, what a guy. Like it just aged badly. So she's on a terrible date with a plastic surgeon, and Bruce Willis comes to her at the restaurant. Crater Face falls out of the elevator dead, hands Maddie Hayes the watch. Now it's on.
But we're going to flash forward because it gets confusing when the police involve them and they're talking about the watch and da 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 da. And then it turns out Bruce Willis palmed the watch. Anyway, all of that gets very confusing, and probably because there are a lot of holes in this story.
Yes.
But what I love most is when, can we just say that the psychopath now is a Nazi?
No, he's not a Nazi. You
Isn't
got
he?
it wrong. No, this is what I wanted to talk about on top of everything else. One of the opening scenes, like a modest income family, extended family, eating a dinner and having a birthday party for a little girl in the kitchen. And the grandmother comes in and she says, Heinz, the phone is for you. And he goes in and in his German accent, the minute that I saw that, I was like, 80s, mysterious German. He's a Nazi.
Right?
Right. I thought you were saying that the Mr. Simon was a Nazi.
Aren't they all Nazis?
No, Mr. Simon's not a Nazi. The only Nazi who's trying to get the diamonds is the grandfather who's running after them later in the sweater vest, tie, and jacket
Okay.
with the German pistol.
So who's Mr. Simon? He's also European.
No, he's not. He's just affected.
Okay.
No, he's not European. He's just, again, a plot hole. He's just
All right.
some dude who knows
Wants
about this and
diamonds.
wants diamonds, but we never know how he knows
Well,
about
anyway,
anything.
okay. But when Mr. Simon and Mr. Simon's
Henchman.
thank you, a lot goes down. But then
Like, again,
Bruce Willis.
inexplicable information. We can't even tell you. We don't know how it happened. Great. So
but
Bruce Willis has the watch.
Bruce Willis has the watch. Sybil Shepherd thinks she's given the watch to the police. They are both tied up in Sybil Shepherd's kitchen mysteriously by Mr. Simon and the henchmen, who then say, we're going to torture you to get the watch. But then ultimately they believe her that she's given it to the police.
Not only that, the best scene in the entire show, again, like, who was writing this? That they're in her kitchen. She has an electric stove. They put the burner on. They're tied up in the kitchen, and to threaten them, out of nowhere, there's a knockwurst. And he's holding the knock as if Sybil Shepherd's character would have a knockwurst in the fridge.
They came with a knockwurst.
They came with
Come
it
on.
in their pocket. And they're holding it with metal tongs and searing it directly on the burner. And like the smoke the steam comes up from, and they're like,
the implication being, we're going to burn you.
Right.
If you don't give us the watch.
Right. Which
But
they,
then she
and
says
then
no, and so they go.
eventually they're like, well, we hope you're telling us the truth. And off they go. And the minute they're gone, she's like, David, turn around. I can untie you. This whole time, they could have just untied each other. Who wrote this?
Okay. Yes, very strange. Also, do you notice how many times she hit him?
Well, he called her a cold bitch in the opening.
Yes, that is absolutely
So my
true.
misogyny thing started with him not liking her, calling her a cold bitch.
Yes,
She smacks him.
I'm not saying that he didn't deserve to be slapped, but there were 2 slapping incidents, and also hearkening back to when her
Harkening.
chef was breaking all of her stuff, she breaks stuff in his office. It's all very destructive and violent in a comedy. It's supposed to be comedic that she's throwing a clock at his head and it goes through the window behind him. I'm just saying, I found it a little unsettling.
Yeah, and he says, "Well, you're lucky I ducked." I'm like, "No, you're lucky you ducked." Like, what the fuck?
You would have
She
died.
Yeah, she hauled off with, like, what
Like,
looked
are you
like a
actually trying to
10-pound clock.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was but weirdly, like, if only it had been used for character development, but no.
No.
So, the other great
Oh,
thing that I
wait.
love
I
is
have to sorry, one more thing. Just a line that I thought was adorable.
Please.
"Cooties the size of oysters?"
Yeah, what the fuck was that?
There are lots of, like, outtakes. I know you're saying it was poorly written, but then there were some things where I was like, "I
Well,
love that."
okay, well, there are a couple of things that I felt like Bruce Willis improvised, and there were 2 that really stuck out for me. One was that, cooties the size of oysters. It's like, you were reaching for that one. The other thing was, those of us who were thriving in the '80s know that one of the regrettable things that the eventually truly beloved Bruce Willis did was release an R&B album.
This is
And
true.
on this album, there's a lot of harmonica playing. And in this pilot, they decide that she's going to stay at his office and sleep on the couch. He goes into the other room, leaves the door open, and inexplicably while she's trying to sleep now, he is playing harmonica and he's playing Blue Moon,
Yeah.
which clearly is tied to what they eventually call the detective agency.
No, it was always called that because
The shampoo.
the shampoo that she advertised when she was a model was Blue Moon.
I'm just saying it's another reference to Blue Moon.
Yeah.
All wrapped into the same nonsense. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was sweet. She smiled. She liked it,
I
Jessica.
hated the harmonica. I was just like, really? Bruce, who did you have to convince? Like, this is my opportunity. I'm going to get my harmonica playing in. This will be my big break for my album. It was so dumb. I'm sorry I didn't like it. Anyway, they then take this watch because they're like, this watch doesn't even work. It doesn't even have an hour hand. Like, what is this? They go to a pawn shop to figure it out. And did you catch the name?
Yes, I did.
Hmm.
The pawn shop was owned by Mr. Dorfman.
Yes, a name you don't hear frequently. Hmm.
It's Jessica's last name.
It's my maiden name.
Yeah, no, that was very exciting.
Yes.
I wrote it down, Mr. Dorfman. I also wrote down when they ended up in the bar that they were having kamikazes.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Yes.
So 80s.
Like, what could be more 80s than I'm just going to have a kamikaze shot? Can you whip that up behind the bar?
All right. So back to the pawn shop. So the guy opens it up and there's a series of numbers. What did you think those series of
I
numbers?
immediately knew that it was longitude number. I knew it was
Really?
coordinates. It was
I
so
thought it was
obvious.
like a safety. I thought it was a safety deposit box.
What I saw was that it was a long string of numbers, and I deduced, well, they're on a bit of a wild goose chase because we now know that there's diamonds, which has been revealed in some other Nazis like soliloquy, and so they have to find it. And so there's this long string of numbers. That's a bit tropey. So I was like, okay, they're gonna wind up having to find a map.
And if I may say, where they ended up was so outrageously bizarro. They ended up at the top of a clock tower.
So they follow the coordinates. The make of the watch is the same as what's on the building. It's like they were at the Longines factory or the Bulova factory, right?
Right.
And so
I think it was the Empire. I could be making that up.
it's this wildly elaborate Art Deco building with like
What city are they in, by the way?
LA.
Okay.
And they decide that because that's where the coordinates lead and because the watch is missing one of its hands, somehow they decide that the diamonds are going to be where the hands of the clock are. That this is a jump in logic that is genuinely astonishing.
But again, very similar to the glass elevators, we have to have somebody hanging off one of the hands of a clock, just like in Adventures in Babysitting and Back to the Future.
And I don't know, Chaplin?
It was actually Harold Lloyd who does the hanging, who did it actually in real life. But yeah, no, it was absolutely ridiculously absurd.
Wait, get this. So he keeps trying to climb up this ornate
and can't
thing,
do
and
it.
he just keeps falling. And then Maddie's like, "I'll do it," in heels. So she's going
and
up,
a skirt.
and a skirt, and of course he's like, "I can see up your skirt." She's going up. She somehow gets onto one of the hands of the clock and is just dangling there. Now, like the elevator chase, stationary objects in a chase. This goes on for so long. And
What
you're like,
about
what
the
the fuck?
ladder?
So after they scale this bullshit with this terracotta open work, she gets up there. He's like, wait a minute, runs inside.
There's
There's a ladder. And
the
he's like,
whole time.
right. And he's like, oh, now I'll save you from being on the hand of the clock with the ladder, which, by the way, he has not secured to anything. He goes up.
But somehow it's able to be parallel to the street that's like 20 floors
so
below.
He goes up it, and then it
tips over.
Tips over. So now it's hanging out over, La Cienega Boulevard. I'm making that up. And it has not been secured on the non-dangling side. So it's just
there.
A piece of metal that all of their weight is on the side that's dangling. There's no counterweight.
It makes absolutely no sense. Also, she's
Zero.
hanging there for so long. I mean, at first I was a little panicky because I was like, I would have fallen. I would have fallen. I was like, Meg, you would have fallen like
8
half an hour ago.
Well, also,
because none of this physics is not a part of this.
None of it. What I was thinking when she was on the ladder, he says very casually, because she's hanging from it, staring away from the building, and he wants her to come to her. He goes, turn around. And I was like, she's doing a hand over hand bent arm hang from a ladder? No one can do that. There's like one kid in grade school who can do that for the presidential physical fitness test. One. Even better, though, if I may, all of the scenes where Maddie is doing all of this stuff, it is so clearly a burly man in stockings, heels, and an ill-fitting suit.
No.
Oh, honey. And a ridiculous wig at the same level of gorgeousness as Craterface's mohawk. And you can tell because the legs are so thick. And I was like,
I have to watch it.
You have to watch it again. I was watching it on my iPad. So I was like nose to screen. And I was like, oh man. Like it was a very big stunt man. And I was just dying. And every time they had her moving around, that's why she was hanging, not facing him, because to get down the ladder, it was like, Bob in his outfit. And then Bob turns around and then there's a cutaway and then it's her on whatever their equivalent of a green screen was hanging from this ladder. So it was so fabulously shoddy.
Also,
it was so good.
I felt like there was this running thing where I don't know if she called him a pussy.
She did. She said,
Right.
You fight like a pussy.
Okay.
No, not a pussy. A sissy.
A sissy. You
A
fight like a
sissy.
sissy. And he has this internal moment where he's, you know that this is, I felt like I knew it was character development. Like we're going to find out later on why he doesn't hit with a lot of gusto. And I felt like that was why he couldn't climb up the building because he's, a sissy because of, I assume it's something about Vietnam, but what do I know?
He says in the opening he was not in Vietnam.
Oh, okay. So there's something else going on.
No, I think it was just they wanted her to be able to punch him as like a battle of the sexes thing and be the one.
No, I swear to God, there's a moment in the car where he just has
he
this
gets
moment
pissed.
where he's like, but there's a reason. I swear it's backstory.
Well,
at least
we're going to find out.
I was sold on that.
I love that you were
watching?
sold. I was all in. Oh, are we going to keep watching Moonlighting? I think we should. So here's one good thing. Bizarrely, in this hour and a half episode, in the last half hour, Bruce Willis stops being gum cracking, wise talking, oyster comparing cootie weirdo, and he actually becomes a person talking to her. And
Yeah.
that was the moment where I was like, oh, this guy can act. And
And it's an
there's
interesting character. Something's going on there.
right. But it's in the last half hour. So I was just kind of like, did they let him finally act? Or like, what happened to the script? Did someone else take over writing the script? What happened in the writer's room? Why was this allowed to happen?
I mean, really what it came down to, because you're right, like the story is all over the place. And, and actually, I think it started in a good place and that it ended up in an absurd place with the diamonds and everything, which, by the way, ended up all over the streets of LA. So they didn't even successfully solve the case because they didn't have the diamonds in their hands.
Well, the best thing, which we've neglected, is that while they're on the clock tower, who shows up but the elderly Nazi with his World War II era pistol.
Right.
And when they find the diamonds, instead of having numbers on the clock, they have like dashes, and each one of them is mysteriously made of glass that's easy to break. And her foot goes through one, and then the bag of diamonds with a Nazi double-headed eagle
I did not notice that.
comes out. And I'm like, okay, I got it. It's the Nazi diamonds. And then the guy comes out with his like, we have ways of making you talk. And he's hanging by the bag of diamonds from Bruce Willis's hand off the ladder. And Bruce is like, I'm going to save you, Nazi guy. And Nazi guy has the complete Raiders of the Lost Ark scene where it's
Yeah.
like, I can't let go of the Nazi gold. And of course, that is his undoing. And he falls to La Cienega Boulevard with
All the diamonds.
not all of them. I went back because I was like, are you guys kidding me? All of the diamonds? No, there were still a few clinking on the other side in the other corner
But
of
we
the
never
bag.
hear of them again.
No, of course not. Because that we now know that they won in some mysterious, maybe someone ran down and collected them off the street as well as what was in the bag.
I mean, one very important thing that we learned from the pilot is that, in fact, the Bruce Willis character is not a complete dodo head, that he is good at his job because he does have good instincts. And she has to admit, wow, you're actually really good at this, even though you're a sissy. Right?
Yeah. Weird.
Yeah.
And
so they're going to go into business with each other. Why not?
yes, exactly. Well,
What else
what
does
else?
she have to do?
What else? She's got
She doesn't
nothing
have
else
any
going
other
on.
income, so she might as well, right?
Yeah, I guess. Again, like she's an incredibly famous model. At one point, her lawyer at the beginning of the show, her lawyer's like, maybe you should get a job modeling. And she's like, I don't wanna. I was like, I don't wanna. Are you nuts?
And isn't he the guy from the A&P commercials, the lawyer?
The A&P commercial. I
Like
recognized
grocery
him.
stores?
Really?
Yeah.
I did not put that together.
Yeah, he used to do local ads for the A&P. I'm pretty sure.
Well, that can be checked out. Yeah, it was the whole setup for the show was all of your money has been lost, but you don't want to do what you've been doing to earn all of that money because you don't wanna. So now you're going to be hanging off a ladder with Nazi diamonds with a guy you just called a
Now,
sissy.
do you think if you had had all of that footage, because this is what was very, very strange about this pilot.
I love they're like, I'm going to boil it down to the one thing.
All right. I scheduled exactly an hour to prepare for this yesterday. Oh no, Meg. The pilot was an hour and 20.
Yeah.
What? That's crazy. And in fact, as I mentioned to you, we had a house guest who's a showrunner this past couple of days. And I asked him this morning, like, 1985, an hour and 20 pilot, so probably 2 hours. What up with that?" And he said, "That is weird. That is weird. It's not so weird for now, but it was very weird for then." And then he started thinking about it, like, how famous was Sybil Shepherd at the time? And he was like, "Nope, weird. Can't explain it." All right, so my question for you is, you've got an hour 20 of that footage. Do you think you could have made a better pilot that was, in fact, maybe 45 minutes, which is really what it should have been, plus commercials, it would have been an hour?
Well, there's a caveat. I wanna know what they cut out that were the okay.
No, no, no,
So
no, you have to
could I
answer
have
my
cut what
question.
they had? Yes, I could have. I would have made the elevator chase very quick. There is no need for the women to come in and say, "Mr. Dorfman, where are you?" Like, there were all of these little bits and asides and, like, how long did he have to cook the knockwurst anyway? Like, that was ridiculous. How long do they need to be running around on the clock tower? They were all and that's why I said at the very beginning, the pacing was not only bad, but weird that to me, it felt like they were trying to fill up
Mhm.
an hour and 20 minutes. And I was like, "What
Or
is
they
this even
maybe they didn't
about?"
really know what kind of show, because it is a pilot. Is it a drama? Is it a comedy? How do we show that it's a comedy? We do this Harold Lloyd thing. How, you know what I mean? Like, how do we create a romance
Oh, well,
between the 2 of them without it, giving too much away? Because Lord knows, like, if we actually have them get together, then we've
the
solved the whole
show is
thing in
over.
1
But,
episode.
you know how they said it they showed us it was a comedy? In the first scene where she goes to his office, poor Alice Beasley is
Yeah,
hit over the head with a basketball, and then the wastebasket that he's using falls over her head like something from a Looney Tunes.
I know. I felt bad for her, but
And
that ended up being a great role for
well,
her.
her 1,000%. And if you noticed, she was one of the 3 top billed people. She was
Amazing.
which made me wonder what she had done prior, so why was she getting that billing? But what I wanted to know was really, why did this pilot get picked up?
Mhm.
What could have made this get picked up? And the only thing that I could think about was, well, the following. The scene we didn't talk about is when he gets the watch off of Maddie.
Mhm.
They're dancing,
Yeah.
and it was very sexy. They had great chemistry. You could tell. It was the first moment where I was like, "Oh, he is gonna be a sex symbol. I got it. Okay." So there's that scene. I thought that in, like, that last half hour when they're allowed to act together, they actually have a rapport, and whoever was doing the writing for that last piece got it right. So if they were going to take a gamble, and this is what I think, that she had enough clout, she did have enough clout for someone to decide to relaunch her career with a TV show. And she had a lot of famous friends. Like, she was really hooked in. I think I'm going to go out on a limb and disagree with Carl. I think that the elements that I just listed made it something that people would pick up, but I think that it's who you know. She had clout.
Well, I'm certainly glad they did pick it up, because I have not seen the show since it aired. I have never seen it in a rerun,
Mm.
and I remember loving this
Oh, it
show.
was the best.
So looking forward to it every single week. So we've just, like, torn it a new one, but it was actually an incredible, incredible
Well,
show.
that's why I wanna keep watching it, because I do remember loving it, but as so much of, like, 90% of what we talk about on this show, what did we love as teenagers, and how do we see it now?
Mhm.
And, I don't know. The one thing I will say, I need to ask you this. When you were watching it the first time around, were you also mystified by her wardrobe?
No, not really. I don't remember really paying too much attention to what she was wearing.
I remember that I was like, "This is a really attractive, svelte, young woman." Like, she's like 35 years old.
Exactly, 35.
Oh, really? Huh.
Mhm.
And they have her in the stuff in these, like, flowy satin suits and heels. the satin suits that they eventually put B. Arthur in the
Mhm.
Golden Girls. Like, they're really
Like the
just,
bows, the blouses with the
but
bows
yeah, just,
and untucked.
yeah, everything is just, she looks big and like they're hiding something. And in the few moments where those costumes like blow in the wind or whatever, you're like, this woman looks amazing. Why? Yes, it's the 80s and that was a particular kind of fashion, but it was awful. And
Well,
the shoes always matching the outfit, the gray shoes. Ugh.
one thing I will say that
Mm.
I do remember from the time was they eventually accused her, or there were jokes about Vaseline on the lens, which is ridiculous. Because I'll tell you, we just watched a pilot. There was zero Vaseline on that lens, and she looks friggin' fantastic. And not a shocker. First of all, jeans. Second of all, she's only 35 years old. But eventually, they start talking about her as though she's ancient,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous.
That's, I think, a great comment, Meg. And the difference between who can make a show now and who can't. And I know that it's fantasy, so it's a different set of rules. But who's that enormous, tall woman who's in Game of Thrones who played Brienne of whatever? She's blonde and Gwendolyn something. Anyway, she would never have had a role. Ever, ever in anything, ever. Most conventionally beautiful blonde Sybil Shepherd was given a hard time. Like, give me a break.
Give me a break.
Give me a break. So, Meg, I just need to tell you that yet again, I need you to hear from me. This was a stroke of genius. Your decision that we should watch Moonlighting was brilliant. And I am forever indebted to you because you've now opened up a whole new world of ways for me to waste time.
Okay.
So,
I was like, uh-oh,
no,
where's
no.
this going?
This is
It was
great
very
procrastination.
enjoyable. It was very enjoyable. And I'm very glad we did it. And who knows, maybe I don't want to make any promises because, who knows what the future holds, but maybe we'll do this sort of thing again. We talked about doing something that was like Mystery Science Theater.
We
This is our
did.
version of Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah, yes, I think this is great. And maybe it's more Moonlighting, maybe it's a different show.
Maybe. So,
I just thought of a show.
what did you think of
Facts of Life.
Oh, I loved watching the pilot of Facts of Life, which had a very different cast, as I recall. Anyway, okay, let's stay on topic.
Okay.
So, on topic, we are going to take 2 weeks off. Both Jessica and I have work travel. Jessica is going to London. I am going to Denver and Tampa. So, in any case,
I've never heard anyone say Tampa quite that way. That's almost like Matt Berry, like his insane pronunciation. Have you ever been to Tampa?
But we will both be doing busy things outside of New York. But we will reconvene in New York in a couple weeks with another episode. And happy early summer, everybody.
Yeah. Happy good weather and good spirits.